There are whole communities of people who have been displaced because the fisheries have declined. We have a problem in North America, especially in the U.S. We have working waterfronts, and these working waterfronts depended on the wild harvest of many finfish species.
We are seeing less and less fish are making it back to the systems. Fishing is always inconsistent, if anything. Over the last decade, our area has struggled. We've really struggled with being able to catch enough fish and providing an income.
As the population grows, you're going to find that our terrestrial food sources are under a lot of pressure. So we need to find new land, new fresh water, more fertilizer. You'll find that climate change is also a factor in terms of droughts and floods.
Now, when we take a look at growing kelp, we are growing a low-impact organism, an organism that doesn't require fresh water. It can taste very good.
Some people think that it's the new kale, and we've all eaten a lot of kale over the last 10 years, and maybe it's time to try something different.
We're creating kelp farms because we want kelp mariculture to be incorporated into the American and domestic production. There's a huge amount of seaweed being consumed in our country, and almost all of it's coming from overseas. So we're growing the seaweed ourselves and then harvesting it. We're not pulling any seaweed out of the natural environment other than the materials we need for the seed stock. We're not pulling out 20,000, 40,000 pounds of wild habitat. We're supplementing that habitat with our mariculture or kelp farms. I go through it by hand, make sure every blade looks good. Let's get the excess water off it, put it in bags, freeze it, and then vacuum seal it.
Kelp has huge potential. The seaweed is one of the fastest growing plants on the planet. It can grow more than a foot every day and, unlike land crops, doesn't need fertilizer or fresh water to thrive. It also has huge nutritional value. Some types have 5 times more potassium than bananas, 5 times more calcium than whole milk, and 28 times more iron than sirloin steak. That makes kelp an attractive, sustainable alternative in food production. Ballooning populations and our reliance on meat are putting more and more pressure on farmland. Right now, 36% of the crops are used for animal feed, products like corn and soy, which require land and fresh water to grow. Farmed kelp products could drastically reduce our reliance on crops grown on land. It's already being used in food products. But to make the most of kelp, we need more of it. Much more. When enough kelp producers are up and running, the plant could be used to produce better quality feed for aquaculture and animals. Kelp feed has been shown to reduce the need for antibiotics in pigs and improve the protein content in chicken. It also cuts methane gas produced by cattle. As kelp production grows even more, it could also be used as biofuel powering cars and planes. If we used 9% of the world's oceans to farm seaweed, the crop could produce enough biomethane, an area 4.5 times the size of Australia, to replace all our biofuel needs and suck 53 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere every year. But the kelp industry needs a major kickstart to reach its full potential. A new wave of ocean farmers are already harnessing the power of kelp. Using floating ropes deep underwater, rows and rows of kelp can be farmed alongside shellfish. But it's not a low-risk, inexpensive investment. It takes about $20,000 and/or the cost of a boat to get started laying and putting seaweed lines in the water. That investment could yield around $37,000 in profit each year by producing 10 tons of kelp and 150,000 shellfish per acre.
I'm a lifelong fisherman. I've been fishing out of open skiffs my entire life here in Kodiak.
Go ahead and pull this over.
What we're doing. So this is my first year kelp farming. Kelp farming kind of has been a natural fit for me. There's lots of unknown right now, and it's not easy. You know, there's a lot more to it than just setting your lines out, letting the kelp grow, and going and get it and selling it. It's not that simple. You know, it's much more complicated than that. This year, we didn't get the permit till January 21st. I had to go start setting the gear out. And so I'm working out of an open skiff in January, and the skiff is icing up, it's snowing out. You know, it was pretty challenging.
Seaweed as a food, I believe, needs to change its name, because when we think about weeds, we think of them as invasive species typically. And so if we can come up with some new names for vegetables from the sea, like sea lettuce or sea kale, or things that don't have the word weed in them, I think that will be much more successful in people feeling comfortable with the idea of eating this vegetable from the sea.
I think that's the kind of larger trend behind seaweed, is that people are trying it in these new ways and sort of exploring the potential of it. And some of the early work that we did with dulse seaweed, we've tried, I think, 30 different applications. I mean, everything from beer to bread, butter, and ice cream.
There is a tremendous amount of interest by the U.S. government in growing kelp, especially growing kelp for biofuels. However, in order to do this and make sure that it's competitive as a biofuel, we have to get the cost of production down. And the cost of production means finding fast-growing strains, and that's what we're trying to do. What we need to do, when we look at the viability of kelp for biofuels, we have to get the cost of production down to about $80 a dry ton. That is the target. Now, where are we today? We're probably double that.